Here we are for the work together on 3-3, the work together 3-3. So this left page you see right here can be found in your textbook on page 72. So let's work through it together. On the right hand side here we'll have the journal entry that we're doing. So now our next transaction after April 9th is on April 12th we paid cash for rent. So the first thing you got to think to yourself, what are the two things affected? Well, you see that you paid cash, so cash is going to be affected. And then you also see that you paid rent, so rent expense is the other account that's going to be affected. And notice that we use check number 4. So what we're going to do in order to fill this out is the first thing we want to put in is we want to put in the date. So we put down the 12. The next thing that we want to do, since cash is the other account affected, what's the other general account that's affected? So the account title here we're going to put in is rent expense. And the source document that we're getting this from is we are getting this from check number 4. And now the next thing we want to take a look at is what's our debit amount. So since we're paying cash for rent, rent expense is going to be the debit because that's the one that's going to go up. That's the normal balance of a rent. Of an expense account, we are going to go up for $1,000. The other thing that's going to happen is cash is going to go down, so our credit on cash is going to go down $1,000, and we have a debit and a credit here on this transaction. Working out nicely. Now let's look at the next transaction. On April 13th, we received cash from sales of $2,500. So what are the two accounts that are going to be affected? Well, we know that sales is going to go up, and we know that cash is also going to go up because we're receiving that cash. So let's take a look at how we enter this one. For this one, first thing we got to write down is the date. And for the account title, since we are using both sales and cash in these two accounts, all we have to put here is a nice little check mark. So we check mark there, and then our source document on that one was ticker tape 13. And we also check that off for post-reference. Now what we want to do is we want to take a look, what is our first thing that we're going to debit? So what's going up? So what's going to be our debit? Well, cash is going up $2,500 in this scenario, so that's going to be our debit. And then what's going to happen there is our sales is going to be credited because that's also going up, so a sales credit of $2,500. Now the next transaction. Let's take a look on April 14th. We sold services on account to L. Rowe for $510. So you got to think, what are the two accounts affected here? Well, we sold them on account, so that means that we have money that's to be received. So accounts receivable is one account that will be affected, and it's also a sales. So we know that sales is going to be affected. So it's going to be a sales credit, but cash is not affected here, and that's important to know. So the first thing that we want to take a look at is what other account is affected. And first thing, we'll date it. And the other account that's affected is accounts receivable from L. Rowe. And we received that from S1, or sales invoice 1. So what's going to be our debit amount? Well, the one that's going to be debited is the asset account, which is accounts receivable, so that's going to go up. So accounts receivable is going to go up to $510. And now it's also going to be a sales credit, so we're going to credit sales $510. Moving on to the next transaction on the 19th, we got 3 more to go, halfway done. On the 19th, we paid cash for the electric bill of $148 from check number 5. So the thing that's going to be, the two accounts affected are cash and utilities expense. So let's write this one out. So the first thing we do is we date it. The other account that's affected is utilities expense. And we got that from our document number of check number 5. Now the two accounts affected are utilities expense as well as cash, because those are the two. So cash is going to be going down and our expense is going to be going up, ultimately lowering our owner's equity. So what we're going to do here for cash, we want to do our debit first, so that's going to be the expense. So utilities expense is going to be debited $148. And then cash is also going to be going down, so that's going to be your credit of $148. So that's that transaction. Now on to April 20th. We received cash from the owner, and the first thing I'm going to do is date it, on account from L. Rowe for $255. That was coming from receipt number 2. So we need to fill this out, and now L. Rowe, we know from earlier in the month, owed us money, and now that's going to go down. They're not going to owe us as much, but now cash is going to go up. So we'll put this one, the account that's going to be affected here is accounts receivable. L row, which we had from the previous month, right there. And we got this one from receipt 2, RT, is our source document. Now what's our debit amount? Well, the one that's going to be debited, since both accounts receivable and cash are asset accounts, the one that's going to be debited is cash, because that's the one that's increasing, the amount of cash we have on hand now. So cash is going to go up $255. And then the credit. Since accounts receivable is an asset account, that means in order to make it lower, you're going to have to credit that account, and we'll credit that for $255 because we do not have as much money that people owe us anymore. They owe us less now that they've paid us. Now let's move on to the last transaction. We paid cash to the owner for personal use of $1,000. So we're paying out that cash to the owner so that they can take out the money for whatever reason the company doesn't need it anymore. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to date it. The two accounts affected here are going to be cash because that's going to go down, and then Norm Derner is going to go down as well for that drawing account. So let's take a look here. So this one is Norm Derner drawing. And we saw this because we wrote him check number 6. So C6. And now we want to take a look at the debit amount. So what exactly are we going to debit? Well, the drawing account is an owner's equity account. So what we want to do there is we want to debit that account and we want to credit cash because cash is going down. So we have our debit and our credit in the transaction. So we're going to debit this one, $1,000. The next thing we're going to do is we need to credit one for every debit. So we need to have a cash credit of $1,000. So now as you take a look there, that's it for the work together 3-3. Hopefully this is starting to be a little clearer to you. I'll zoom out here so you can see the full page and what it should look like up to this point. As we make our way through the month of June, we have one more section on this work together for the month of June in work together 3-4. We'll see you for that one.